So I attended the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, graduated in '09 with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, and then went on to earn my master's degree in city and regional planning from Morgan State University with a concentration in transportation urban infrastructure.
So what is your role at Atkins, and how is Atkins involved in the infrastructure industry?
So I was brought into Atkins to manage large scale planning projects, but also to expand market share, initially in the Charlotte, North Carolina region. But most recently, I've taken on a new role where I serve as a senior project director and strategy manager within our rail and transit business nationwide. And I help clients strategically plan for and advance rail and transit specific needs on a planning basis to then help get them through the rest of the life cycle of that project.
Please describe the Beyond 77 corridor study. What were its goals and main conclusions?
So Beyond 77 was the largest study that the Charlotte Regional MPO had ever undertaken, really the largest type of planning exercise that the metropolitan space in Charlotte had ever undergone before. And we were charged initially with looking at the interstate across about 70 miles, spanning across two states, multiple counties and cities. Um, and the charge was we want to improve mobility along the corridor without physically changing the highway at all. And that in and of itself is a complicated feat. And so we were charged with looking at the parallel and intersecting networks that interacted with Interstate 77 from a physical perspective. But then we realized about halfway through the project that we needed to unravel their existing conditions from a policy or programmatic standpoint, as well as technology that they had on the ground, as well as what was programmed by the state and local jurisdictions. So it became this huge web of related topics that we knew would directly or indirectly impact mobility currently and in the future as it is slated to double in population over the next 25 years.
So what is the Strategic Users Implementation Tool, or SUIT, and how did it evolve from this study?
One of the main points of deliverables out of the study the MPO wanted was they wanted a flexible toolkit. And we had absolutely no idea how to deliver that because typically at the end of a planning project, you deliver a set of strategies that you follow point A through point Z, and you do it in order. And it's a prioritization process. This one, they really wanted to pick and choose what they would do when they wanted to do it based on politics or social pressures or other issues that they may be enduring. And so we kind of took that, and especially kind of going back to my other response where we looked at all the different things that impacted mobility, not just improving infrastructure, but looking at policy or programmatic implications. And we realized that we wanted to help demonstrate interdependencies and relationships across all of them, and to then help educate planners, managers, and elected officials so that they could better understand if they wanted to do project M, then they might want to look at policy A and program D prior to implementing project M. And so we went through this very large exercise to try to understand how we could demonstrate um, a dynamic digital web per se to help drive the power of those relationships and then allow the users to be able to plan dynamically over periods of time and then track the progression of the planning implementation. They could also add to it if they wanted to. But the power of the suit application uses what I would call relatively new endeavors for government agencies is to use graph database technology applications to really help drive a new form of analytics across platforms to kind of show that power of relationships, drop the silos, and really start to encourage collaboration and coordination across multiple disciplines and concepts to look at things more globally.
So how do you think that this study and the resulting toolkit are different from similar previous studies and results? Like, how do you think that there are improvements on what's been done before?
I'll speak generically. We couldn't find a project that did anything to this scale. Typically, you look at things within their silos to kind of stay within scope. And I'm not saying we went out of scope, but we kind of evaluate our scope multiple ways across the process to get the client what they needed, which was that flexible toolkit. And so we couldn't really find any initiatives that truly looked at the comprehensive elements that impacted mobility and I'm going to keep saying it again, the policy, programmatic, or even technological spaces that would help make people flow, look at mode choices, and help improve aspects of their lives from health and time. And we looked at a couple projects. One was in Arizona, and another one was in Utah, and each one of them kind of built upon themselves. But neither of them, because those were the largest corridor studies conducted in the U.S. prior to this Beyond 77 one, none of them kind of looked at the full gambit of what we did.
So what is Power BI, and how did it help public engagement on this project?
Power BI is a part of Microsoft's suite of applications. It's an advanced analytics platform. It kind of Excel on steroids is what I would call it. And we were challenged with making sure that our data from the public engagement process was transparent. And so when we joined up with the TPO and we wanted to move forward with creating a robust engagement process and public marketing campaign, we encouraged the client to embrace something relatively new. And we used digital marketing in a full-blown kind of PR campaign to help gauge public interest in wanting to be engaged on the process. And by doing that, instead of getting a traditional maybe 500-person response across our entire study process, within our first 6 weeks of engagement, we only ran 6 weeks for the first period. We ended up with 15,000 responses, of which gave us a ton of raw data. And then the qualitative responses was a whole nother ballgame. And we didn't know how to filter through it all. But we also didn't want to do it an injustice by summarizing it in a PDF document. And so working with some of our software developers and trying to understand what can we do to make this dynamic story be told to elected officials, decision makers, and the general public to say, here's what you're saying, and here's what you can take to help better improve mobility over time as you get involved. And so we use Power BI 3 times over the course of our 3-phase public engagement period, and it just kept growing from there. So we used AI to help augment how we analyze those qualitative responses to extract keywords and phrases. We use sentiment applications to kind of detect anger and or happiness or confidence in the systems. And we pitched all this to the client and their regional partners to make sure that this was going to be public facing. And we wanted to make sure that they were there every step of the way to help make sure that we were producing the data in a consumable manner that was appropriate for their needs, but also transparent enough to make sure that everybody was feeling comfortable with how we conducted the engagement. So Power BI, to get to your question, became such a powerful tool to help us process and look at macro or micro responses. So if you wanted to look at issues within your zip code, which is about as far down as we went to on the geographic level, you could look at information based on demographics within your zip code, based on salary or gender or race, as much as people supply that information. And then you can look and see what their comments were regarding transportation mobility infrastructure or the politics related thereof, and kind of see if there was a positive swing on how they wanted to see improvements or a negative, and they were fed up with certain issues. And we ran the gambit on how we wanted to bring topics to the table. We were creative and intentional on doing that. So we tell a story through 3 different Power BI dashboards over time, from concept planning and getting people excited and interested to kind of getting through, well, how do we pay for all of this stuff once we have solidified projects and ideas moving forward? So it was a great, powerful tool to educate the public, but also helping people understand, here's what people are saying over a 2-year period.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds like a pretty special tool. Do you think this is something that you'll continue to use on many other projects? Is it something you're passing around through the entire company, and might this be something you might even like sell to other companies?
We are, and it always comes up in conversation to say, this is such a low cost production point. It's just looking at data differently. Why not make it dynamic? And once the data is created in the platform, it's at no cost to us or the client to keep it live. So that Power BI application for Beyond 77, even though the project ended a year and a half ago, all that data is still out there, and still available to anybody to access at any point in time. And so we are coordinating with clients in key market spaces And we help them understand and get them to be comfortable with this is something new, but it adds so much value to help you understand, again, the macro and micro levels of what you want to get into.
Okay, could you describe one thing or maybe one or two things that surprised you from this work? That could be either good or bad or indifferent, but it's something that you didn't expect when you got started.
Back to the engagement piece, we did not expect people to want to be involved. But we used a lot of digital marketing and kind of back end Google analytics to help drive people's engagement. And by doing so, the return on investment was amazing. So I was able to get tens of thousands of people to interact with the MPO and the study itself and other initiatives at almost a 50% cost less than it would have taken me to do that grassroots or trying to get people to do that in response to mailers. And so that was a huge lesson learned. And it's become kind of an industry standard white paper now as we kind of pass that on and say, just by looking at marketing and engagement differently, you can engage tens of thousands of more people to help justify your story and your need from the public agency side to then help push forward infrastructure investment into the future. I'd say the other thing is learning to engage with a client on digital innovations and helping them feel comfortable with that to help push forward this flexible toolkit concept. Bringing in some of my subject matter experts to help them learn about the choices and trade-offs with looking at things differently, helping them feel comfortable again with utilizing them and then finding ways to make sure that they can live on in legacy beyond just the state of the contract. That was a surprising thing for us as well as the client. Once they felt a level of comfort, again, based on what my team was able to deliver, they're like, yeah, we're sold. Let's do this. And we were really impressed by their desire to innovate in a market space that wants to continue to make a mark on the world.
What can other engineers learn from this work? And how can they adopt similar solutions in what they do? Basically, what advice could you give them?
One of the biggest challenges that we saw as we went through the first year of the project was because they wanted to look at so many different facets of how mobility can be influenced. It was going to be near impossible to use standards uh, or guidance from the federal government or state entities to help compare apples to oranges. And so we had some crucial conversations with the client to talk them through different options on how we would conduct evaluations. And we wanted to compare those apples to oranges to even a slice of chocolate cake and put them on the same level playing field. And so by having those conversations and walking them through a couple of different scenarios of frameworks, we ended up with the scenario that we applied as a part of what Beyond 77 relies upon. And I would say the biggest learning piece is to not be afraid to think outside the box. There's always the standards to follow, and there's the standards to consider. But if the standards don't quite meet what the client is looking for, especially in the planning space, planning is as much of a science as it is an art form. And so you have the ability to be flexible with how you conduct that planning. And if you can showcase a study such as this one that demonstrates positive movement forward to create a great outcome, why not take that chance, create that framework, test it out, see if it'll work, back it up with facts, and move forward with it if the client is willing to embrace it. I kind of want to talk about the funding pieces as well. So I know we talked about the Power BI with respects to engagement, but one of the biggest pieces that we were charged with doing kind of in parallel with all of the other technical analyses was we were asked to look at funding alternatives, and we were asked to kind of create some short-term and long-term funding options for regional entities to consider. And in North Carolina, that's not an easy thing to do. But again, going back to the public engagement data where we had volumes and volumes of information, we didn't feel it justice to produce a static report on summary values that of what could be at the end of a 50-year period that you could accumulate over time based on a funding mechanism that could theoretically be put in place. So we used the power of Power BI to build in models that demonstrated dynamic applications based on which partners wanted to buy in at what period of time. And then the user of the Power BI application could then go ahead and look through what rates they wanted to apply from a theoretical standpoint. And all we wanted to do was create a conversation starter. When you look at these summary documents, and they're great documents that people have done over the past several decades, they're just summaries. And really wanted to allow people to have the ability to be dynamic with their decision making. To say, well, if we did this rate and this application on property taxes, then we might have this outcome. But let's do a different scenario and let's understand the choice and trade-offs in live time. And anybody can play with it. Anybody can access it. And so we really wanted to make sure that that was at everybody's fingertips to access, and they can model those revenue models numbers out over, I think we did 50 years time. The other piece of that is at the end of the article, I don't know if you're going to publish this or not, but there was a graphic that we had to make custom just for this project. We couldn't find anything else out there like it where it demonstrated to the public to help educate them in one single infographic choices and trade-offs associated with public investment in infrastructure. And that graphic kind of hit home, and we heard great feedback from it in our final engagement piece, to say we've never thought about it like this, but it really helps us to understand where we might be stuck in status quo if we as a collective society do not help pay into it a little bit more to get magnitude benefit beyond to help our city thrive in the future.